Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for showing up today. I'm hoping that you learned a lot from the film. I know it was hard to watch, and I apologize for anyone who might have been re-traumatized by it. To tell the truth, I didn't think about, my guests being formerly incarcerated. There might be a re-traumatization, but I'm hoping that it didn't happen. And so I just want to have my guests introduce themselves, and we're going to start at the right with Ray Boyd.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ray Boyd. I was just released from incarceration after spending 29 and a half years incarcerated for a crime that I committed at the age of 17 years old.
I'm Gary Winfield. I'm the state Senate chair of the Judiciary Committee of the Legislature.
And my name is Barbara Fair, and I'm the lead organizer for Stop Solitary Connecticut, and the organization that was created to end solitary confinement in Connecticut. But in doing our work, we're finding there's so many other things that we need to address in Connecticut prisons, and so we also have added to our work any kind of prison conditions that are harmful.
Yes, my name is Michael Braham. I was recently released as well. I served 25 years in Connecticut prisons. And I was re-traumatized by watching that video. Nothing to be sorry about.
Okay, when we talk about solitary confinement, many people probably think we're just talking about the supermax, because when we got started on our journey, it was about how do we close down Northern, where people were being tortured. Department of Corrections doesn't like when I use the word torture, but I'm sorry, that's exactly what happened inside of Northern. And so that was our original task. But we now want to make sure that people understand, we talk about solitary, we're talking about people who are in their cells 20, 21, 22 hours a day. And when we talk about that fact, there are a lot of people in prison that are in their cells 20, 21, 22 hours a day. And it's not from punishment, it's just how the way we do things here in Connecticut. And so when you think about solitary, make sure you think about prisons, and I guess Gary probably can mention some of them, or anyone really could. The many prisons that we have around Connecticut that actually that's what they do there in their cells 20 or more hours a day. And so when we talk about solitary, we're talking about those people too. We're not just talking about the few that are actually being tortured in a whole different way. So Ray, do you want to talk about the different facilities that you know that house people 20 to 22 hours a day? And what is that day like?
Well, first I'd just like to say that watching that video was, it brought back some devastating memories. I actually, my inmate number for Connecticut is 193919. My inmate number while I was housed in the state of Virginia was 276503. I actually lived 4 cells down from Mr. Frazier. I was present when Mr. Frazier went through his event. I actually left the night of Mr. Frazier's death and was transferred back to Connecticut. When we think about these prisons and being shipped out of state, that compounded a lot of the trauma that a lot of young men that quote unquote were some of the most dangerous that Connecticut were shipping out under that guise. We know that Mr. Tracy wasn't a violent offender. A lot of those guys weren't violent offenders. However, they suffered a traumatic event of being kidnapped and sent to the state of Virginia to do their time under this contract that the state of Virginia had with Connecticut. There are many facilities where outside of the Northern facility where brothers suffer under 22 hours of extreme isolation on a daily basis. As I just stated earlier, I did 29 and a half years, 10,810 days of incarceration in the Connecticut Department of Correction. And majority of that, I would say 99.99% of that, was done in extreme isolation. 22 hours of lockdown in the Cheshire facility, 23 hours of lockdown in the McDougal facility. So there is the outside of recreation, an hour outside, or the 20 minutes for chow, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. there is no real exercise that can take place. That's why you see some of the inmates in Connecticut prisons suffering from high medical issues, because they're in their cells and all they're left to do is lay on their bunks and eat some of these preservative foods to try to sustain their life while they're behind these closed doors. So it's a real hard issue if you're not mentally sound. You see the mental health rate rising in the Connecticut state prisons because some of these brothers can't cope with being confined like that. This is a traumatic experience coming from someone that lived it, as opposed to most people that don't live it. You hear things like they were living in caves, now they're living in beachfront real estate. That's so far from the truth. That place on that rock or any of these facilities are no different from living in a cave. It's so dark and desolate in these places.
So I wanted to bring Gary on, but I wanted to have you talk to, after being in this kind of conditions for so long, what is your adjustment like coming back home, being with family, with loved ones? Just talk about what that's like. And then I want to ask Mr. Braham the same question.
So far the adjustment is been all right. I've been taking it one day at a time. I just was released on the 15th of last month. However, there are, certain mentalities that you try to stay away from. There are certain risk factors that still exist in my neighborhood. So there's certain individuals that I grew up with that I, try to remove myself from away from their company for, the risk of not being able to go back to prison for any violations or anything like that. There are some strains on family relationship because I've been so far removed from certain friends and loved ones. Like, you're only allowed to have 7 visitors on your visiting list. So for 30 years, only people that was allowed to visit me was 7 people. And I come from a big family. I have 6 brothers, 3 sisters, countless cousins, nieces and nephews, and a son. So it's like, who's coming to see me this year? Or who's not gonna come see me? Or who won't I see for the next 5 or 10 years?
Who will they let in?
Or who will they let in? Who's wearing the clothes of the day after they travel, 45 minutes or an hour to see me, and they have to run down to a shopping center and change because one officer one day let them in with the same clothes, and the next officer the other day decided that it's her rule or his rule, and you can't come in. So that puts a strain on the relationship as well. And if you try to have a meaningful relationship with a companion, a lot of times those officers are there to destroy those relationships. They're there to discourage the women or the men from coming to see their loved ones so that they can have rest time or free time on their end.
It's interesting. It's good that you said, you mentioned that, right? It's like everything, so many things is done. These knee-jerk reactions are done in the name of security, right? So, like Ray was just talking about, I was there for years, right? And so I seen a lot of change. And one thing was, and I think you remember, like in 07, 06, right? We had Deputy Warden Adams. He came up with an idea that, no longer would you be able to hold hands in the visiting room, right? And so you got to think about that. You got to sit across from the table, but you can't hold your mother's hand, your wife's hand. You can't even play with your children, right? This is what they did to us, right? And that not only damages the person that's incarcerated, but what about the child? An innocent child that doesn't know what's going on in this room, right? All the child wants to do is run around and play, but the child can't play, right? And so, that creates a lot of chaos and confusion in that business, right? But adjustment, I don't know how I'm adjusting, right? I hardly sleep. I sleep 3 hours a night. I attribute it to adrenaline. Maybe it's adrenaline, but who knows? I haven't seen anybody yet. People are telling me to go see somebody. I may do it. But watching that video, what was prominent in my mind, and nobody's gonna believe this, but Connecticut inmates liked Wallace Ridge. A lot of Connecticut inmates liked it, and they liked it because Wallace Ridge lets you off 5 hours a day. It's instead of being in Cheshire, where you was lucky if you got 2 hours. I did 20 years in Cheshire. I went there in October of 2001 after doing 6 months in chronic discipline. So I was in safe. I was in solitary for about 7 months, right? And, you know, I got to Cheshire. And it's like, if you ask me today, like, how did I survive that? Because I, like, you know, in this last years, it got worse, right? And, you know, me maintaining my safety, I think the only way I got through is I always had a deadline, always had something to do, right? And, you know, so I was heavy into prison litigation to try to remedy some of these things that was going on. And so I always had a deadline in court, and I always was doing my college coursework. So I think that distracted me from kind of losing it. And so, you know, everybody doesn't have that opportunity, right? And so, yeah, without something to do in there, you will lose it. And like Ray said, you know, you got guys locked in the cell all day, right? And it's not like you get the choice of who you cell with. So just imagine being and living in the bathroom with, you know, the most annoying person in the world, right? Or a violent person, or whatever. You got any type of person that you could be in here with, and you're stuck in it. You can't get out. So what happens? A lot of times, violent altercations in the cell. Because what else is gonna happen? You got 2 people locked in a bathroom. It's a bathroom. It's a toilet in here, right? And you know, you got 2 people that just can't get along for whatever reason. All humans don't get along. But what does the system say? If you want to move, you fight. You know what I'm saying? You have to fight. And what happens then? If you're lucky to not get seriously injured, you're gonna go to solitary. So, you know, that's the situation on the inside, right? It's not a good look. And so, you know, we've been talking a lot about oversight. Oversight is needed in the Department of Corrections, because there's no reason why, you know, you say that guys have a 2-hour, 1 hour each shift, which is absurd, but that's what you say is allotted, but then you don't even want to give that up, right? I talk to guys all the time on the phone, and it's like, right now, going on in there, they got this, you know, the governor vetoed the bill, right? He vetoed the bill, and then he issued an executive order, right? And so, you know, even way before the executive order, I think like the commissioner's office saw the writing on the wall, right? And so the commissioner ordered Cheshire to let guys out for an hour and a half each shift, right? This is in contrast to the hour that it was for, you know, the 30 years prior to that, right? And so what the guards did was, you know, they let us out for maybe a couple of weeks or whatever. I guess they were strategizing, because what they did was they started to do a concerted call out, right? And you know, I don't know how the specifics of it goes, but they timed their calling out so that they wouldn't be infracted, right? It was just enough to keep the building short-staffed. That way, they don't have to let anybody out. This was their response to the commissioner saying, give them a half hour extra each day. That was their response. They called out sick, and they did it in a concerted effort to where they had the building locked down for days at a time until they used up all of the days and had to replenish. And then it was right back to again, right after whenever they got it back to where they could start calling out again, they did it. Right? And so, you know, oversight, where does it come in at? Because obviously the administrators are not doing nothing, because everything in the Department of Corrections is law. Every post has a book that every movement in and out of that unit, everything that happens in that unit is written in this book. So if they don't let anybody out, they're not gonna write in the book that they let anybody out. And so the administrator can see that nobody came out for the whole weekend. Why didn't anybody come out for the whole weekend? Nobody has to answer to anybody. It's just like, we didn't let them out. You know, they said it in the video. Officers lie, administrators lie. This is what they do. They cover up for each other. You know, the good ones, you know, succumb to peer pressure. And so we need oversight. We need it.
Thank you. I now want to turn it over, since we're talking about oversight, turn it over to our Senator Gary Winfield, who's our champion up in Hartford, along with a few other champions. And is Robin Porter in the room?
I didn't see her.
Oh, okay, she's another one of our champions. But anyway, these are our champions up in Hartford, but they need our support. They can't do this by themselves. We can't be as family members knowing that things are going on and we sit around and wait for a few other people to do all the work. We have to step up so we can support Gary and Robin and the people up there who have the courage to try to give us what we need. So talking about oversight, Gary, do you want to talk about like in the bill, we asked for oversight, and the commissioner from day one that he was put in position said there was not going to be any community input. What do you feel about that? And is there a possibility of getting that in the bill as we go forward next session?
I'm not surprised by the commissioner's response. I want to step back to your comment for a second. So, what you see going on there is pressure, right? That's what that is. That's pressure, right? Because you have an executive order, and as I've said in the press, executive orders are okay, I guess, but they're not permanent. They're subject to whims, political whims, and pressure. And so what they are attempting to do, because it's not a statute, what they're attempting to do is put enough pressure that at least some portion of that gets reversed. The commissioner experiences that pressure as well, right? As you suggested, the commissioner of his own volition was like, we need to expand the number of hours. Maybe not the number of hours we're looking for, but he's moving in the right direction. And I have to give him that credit, because I've been dealing with a lot of these commissioners, and that's not part of what they're doing. But he can't do
Folded right after.
I get right, yeah, the pressure, right? And so what we have to be doing is moving towards getting in statute the things that we need. The question of whether or not we're going to have a civilian review board after this next session, the likelihood of that, and a civilian review board, no, right? Is it possible that we make movement towards getting a review board that includes civilians and actually is functional? Possibly. Now that goes to the point that Barbara was making, right? There's pressure coming from, the veto came because of pressure from the people inside of the system who work there. And the pressure that was on the other side, our side, wasn't in line with that. It really wasn't. I mean, there's a lot of work that Stop Solitary and some of their allies did, but outside of those people who were standing around the building, nobody's feeling anything. There are your champions who are gonna do the work, but on an issue like this, when you have a governor who's not predisposed to moving in a direction that we want to move in, you have a legislature that is about to go into election season. This is not the issue they're looking to pick up, right? We know that, right? Particularly given what we've seen in the last few months with the kind of notion that everybody is running wild and commit more crimes, and we have changed the law to make it more possible to do that. Legislators don't want to deal with the issue of crime on a normal basis. Given what we're seeing right now, no, right? But I will say, as a person who never looks at what is right in front of us and says we cannot, that I do think that we can make some progress. I do think it will be less than the progress we want, but that progress in statute means that when we move forward, we are moving forward from a new place, and I think that's important. And I want to say that because sometimes, Barbara, I've been doing this for a long time too. Sometimes we get frustrated because we didn't get what we want, and those of us who've been doing this for a long time complain and say, I'm not going to do this anymore, and we keep doing it, right? How many years we got, right?
Yeah.
But we also say to the people who are behind us, who don't have that number of years, and don't know, that's just old folks just saying what they say, that this doesn't work, That incremental thing that we hate is important, because you never have to argue that again. And so I want you to understand that if you go into this session and you get something in statute that moves you forward, that's critical. And be careful about because I've talked to some young people, and I used to say the whole thing about how it's not important, it doesn't mean anything. And I recognize the influence, I've been around a while, I recognize the influence of what I say, and I pull back from that. Because, I'll say that to Barbara, right, because we've known each other for 2 decades. But so can we make progress? Yes, absolutely. Can we make progress if it's another session where the crazy person who does all the criminal justice comes up with a whole bunch of criminal justice bills and nobody's there in this particular election year? Much more difficult. You know what your job is then. Your job is to make it easier. And the way you make it easier is by showing up, by getting others to show up, by inundating us. People who want some really bad things do that all the time.
That's right.
That's what we need to do.
Okay, so I want to clarify for the people from Stop Signs here who are here and those are our allies, that when I talk about a community board, it's not just simply civilians. On that board, we actually want to have somebody from DOC, we want to have a legislator on both sides, we want to have a doctor, nurse, people who've been formerly incarcerated, family members of people who are currently incarcerated. So it's not just a board just of civilians. We're asking people, let's all work together for the better good of those people who can't work. So when I'm told that we can't have any civilian input, that just tells me that we're not really going to make much of a change, because without the people who are most impacted having something to say, being at that table of decision making, things are not going to change, because the other people don't even know what people incarcerated need. They don't interact with those people. They don't talk to those people, so they don't know what they need. So that's why it's important to have those people on the board. And so I'm hoping, Gary, that we will, no matter how hard it is, push against the commissioner when he says he doesn't want any community input.
Yeah. I'm in conversations with not only the commissioner, but the unions. That didn't happen in the last session, not because I wouldn't have had the conversations, but people don't think they need to. Well, the commissioner did, but others don't feel they need to be in conversation. I think after the veto and the pushback, people have realized that those conversations need to happen. It's part of the reason I feel as though, as difficult as it may be to move in this direction, that you can have, we will get to a place, we're not there yet, I'm not saying that, but I think we can get to a place where it may not be the exact makeup we want, but that you can have the civilian input. I think that we can actually get there.
We need the civilian input.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just talking about the possibility of making it happen, and I'm telling you, given the conversations that are going on, I feel like if we keep having those conversations and the external pressure is brought to bear, that you can wind up with the civilian input. And look, whether you have the particular makeup you want or not, once you've gotten that in statute, I mean, you come back the next time and make the makeup more of what you want. Right? The point is that you've gotten the input, you have a board. I think there are conversations that were never going to happen until this point, until it blew up, that can happen now. It's unfortunate we have to do that, but I do think that's possible.
Well, I have to say, one of the things about me, I don't know if people call it stubborn or what it is, but if you tell me something can't happen, I'm sorry, you have just fueled my engine. And those guys would still be in Virginia right now if I listened to what other people told me was going to happen. We would never have passed that bill in the first place if I listened to what other people said we could do. So I just need more people like me who are just not going to give up and determined, persistent, and going to be in their faces of the people of power and let them know we have power too. And I'm going to do that until we have exactly what we need in this state. We need oversight, but we need independent oversight, and we need civilians on that board. We need family members who've been through this hell to be on that board, and we don't need the governor to pick and choose all his gatekeepers. So I think we can do it, and I think we can do it this session. I don't think we have to wait another session. You know why? Because I've been up in Hartford long enough to see when white people have an issue,
That's right.
they get their bills passed in a session.
talking.
When that incident in Cheshire happened, it didn't take 5-7 years to upset parole and everything else. They came right out in the very session that incident in Cheshire happened and passed a lot of laws and strengthened some of those that did that. And so I know what they can do.
That's right.
And so we have to stop accepting the fact that we have to wait 5. Why do we have to continue to have baby steps to justice? I'm sick of it. I think we've been having baby steps to justice for over 40 years. And it's time that we say enough is enough, and that means we're going to have to stand up. We're going to have to do more than talk. We're going to have to show up. That's why I have the shirts out there. Show up in our shirts and demand. Push our legislators to do what needs to be done. Give Gary the support that he needs. But he can't do it by himself, so that means we have to be there to push those other legislators who are indifferent to what happens to us. We're going to have to push them to do something different. So I hope a lot of these people in this room will have a shirt on when we have our session, because we definitely will have one on the, letting you know in advance. We would have a day up in Hartford, the day that the session opened, and that's February 5th, right? February 5th. But we'll do something in January, but put that on your calendar, February 5th, take your shirt and you're going to show up. And you know what? You don't even have to speak. I'll speak for you. But show up. We got to show up. And we can't show up. We have 9,000 people in prison. There's no way in the world I should be happy to get 20 people out. There's no way in the world I should be happy.
That's right. That's right.
When GLC destroyed my son, well, they tried their very best. That put me in this for the rest of my life.
That's right.
The rest of my life, because I've seen what they do to people. And I don't have to have my son in there now. There's other people's sons that are in there now. Other people's daughters in there now. Generations of our kids are being systematically destroyed. And it's time. It's way past time for us to stand up and fight back. So one of the things I want to talk about in the executive order that the governor mentioned, he mentioned Mandela rules. Now, obviously, he doesn't know very much about the Mandela rules, because Mandela rules is really about the minimum, the very minimum standards of care for human beings. Why is that our goal? That shouldn't be our goal. They said the minimum standards of care should be 22 hours.
No.
So we have people in here 21, 22, 23, and weekends 24. We're not following Mandela rules.
That's right.
So that's the first thing he needs to know. We're not even following the rules that he's put in his executive order. And without oversight, none of this matters. So I want to go back to the people who've been in prison to talk a little bit. And I know you have to go, Garrett, so I'm going to try to get it real quick. And you guys kind of think about that when he has to go.
We got you.
Yeah, but I want you to talk about, it's just so much. What is it like just being in a cell that many hours a day?
So being in a cell, like a lot of times when we think about prison, right, we think about the TV shows that we see, and we think about many different depictions that we see. Well, psychological warfare is a battle that's fought without no weapon. So it's hard to actually see and visualize the scars and the wounds that are being left on the minds of the individuals that suffer on a daily basis within these confines. So I think it's important to know that, with the oversight, you need these doctors in there. Like a lot of these brothers, before I came home, there was a young man that committed suicide in a unit in Cheshire. This brother only had 2.5 years or 2 years for possession of stolen guns. Like that oversight, there needs to be something there with mental health. There needs to be something there with medical, where these people are being evaluated the moment they hit the door, not after they're being taunted by staff or their charges are being being made known by facility members to other people because the counselor may not like him or medical staff may not like how this person was addressed. So there's many different, the psychological battle is one of the biggest battles that's being fought in prison. Because we don't see prison riots anymore, like we used to, because the psychological effect of prison is so tremendous on the minds of these young men that are coming to prison nowadays. And I think that needs to be a focal point when we dealing with the intake of individuals coming into prison and how we deal with them. Like their reentry needs to start the day that they get to jail, not 6 months before they get released, or whatever programs they need to take just before they go on before the board, and so on and so forth.
Mr. Braham, can you speak to that? What is it like being in a cell 22 hours a day, and what is your day like?
You can't, like I told you earlier, you can't use me as I'm the exception to the rule. So it's like, I'm blessed, right? So reentry, like Ray said, reentry should start from once you were first incarcerated, right? Because that's one of my biggest problems right now is just getting a grip on technology, right? I got a job and I work harder than everybody else, and I'm behind everybody else because the technology, people are using the technology and they're using it efficiently when I'm just stumbling through, right? And so that's a big obstacle to reentry, you know what I'm saying? And so, you know, me, I got family, I got friends, I got people that look out for me and take care of me. So my reentry is not like anybody else's, right? Where other people gonna fail, I'm not failing because I got people that got me covered. And I was preparing for this the whole time, the whole 25 years. I was preparing for when I was going to be released, right? I never accepted the 32 years that I had. I always fought, and then eventually I got 7 years. I got 7 years old, right? So, you know, even on the inside, I was blessed when I first went in, right? I always had money to buy a commissary, always had a television, always had all of the prison luxuries, right? And so for some people that can keep you occupied and stuff, right? If I pick my video game up and play it for a little bit, I can watch my TV, I can read some books, I can listen to some music, I can do different things. Some people come in, they got nothing, absolutely nothing. So you imagine being in the room, a bathroom, and you got lights, you got electrical outlets, but you ain't got nothing to plug in there.
It's like a baby with no pacifier.
You know what I'm saying? So now you in this cell for 24 hours or 22, 20, whatever, and you have nothing to do. You just in a concrete room with concrete and steel, and you got nothing to do. The window slat is less wider than this. Like it's more narrow than this, right? So you can't see nothing. If you look out the window, you can see right in front of you. If something's going by, you can't even really see it. So you can't, you know, some people like look out the window and see animals or see greenery. You can't see nothing. So you got sensory deprivation going on. You have, you know, somebody in the cell that you can't deal with that's annoying you. He got his issues he's going through, and he's trying to work it out. And his working out is interfering with you. You know what I'm saying? So it's a power keg. You know, and something got to be done.
What are some of the mental health issues, either one of you can answer it, that you think people come out with, like I know anxiety, depression, stuff like that? And what do you do with that?
I think it's a lot of, because there's so much hypervigilance going on in prison, I do think that the antisocial behavior plays a role in one coming back into the community. Sometimes a lot of these brothers go through a lot of trust issues in prison because like Mike was saying, like you get a cellie, you don't know who your cell partner is, you don't know where on this earth he came from, and it's like the administration is putting them in with you. And if you're pretty much situated, you know, your family take care of you, you're trying to stay out of trouble, you may get a guy in there that don't care about nothing. So when you go to chow, you go to rec, he's in either roaming through your cosmetics or, you know, going through, you know, your food or stealing something from you or to just, so you have to like, it's a lot of things that you have to, I always tell these young brothers, like, there's a difference between having courage and being a coward. Like sometimes you have to actually exercise what it takes, the courage it takes to avoid a lot of situations. So like a lot of my stay in prison, I mean, I'm not a tough guy at all, but my stay in prison, I treated prison like it was a landmine. I had to navigate my 29 and a half years through this place because I knew that these landmines or the minds of the individuals that I came in contact with could blow up on me at any moment because I didn't know exactly what they were going through in their heads at any given moment. So you had to watch what you said, who you spoke to, and who you dealt with on a daily basis because you literally couldn't tell what any man was going through at any moment or every given time. And a lot of times those are to some people's detriment. Like you have guys that's walking down the hall and one guy because he doesn't have anything, or like your Mike saying in the cell you don't have anything. And I referenced the baby without the pacifier. Those silent cries that's going off in his head, you don't hear. And something is telling him how to respond to that. You know, and a lot of times his response is because he doesn't have anything, is a negative response.
And it gets a disciplinary reaction. That's what happens.
And he may get the attention of a captain or a lieutenant that says, you know what, we're gonna give you a loan of TV because we want you to chill out because you done caught 40, 50 tickets within the last 2 years because you didn't have anything coming in the door.
Gary, because I know you gotta go. What would it take for legislators to become oversight? I mean, because I can understand why our lawmakers can't go into the prisons and just review what's going on and the conditions. Why does that not happen, and how do we get that to happen?
So let me just say that I think things are a little different than when I showed up. When I first showed up, and you probably noticed, Bob, if a legislator wanted to go into a prison, it took forever to get in there. It took an inordinate amount of time, and had a little bit of a back and forth with the system, and we now can get in pretty quickly, right? If I went to a prison right now, I could get in under an hour, normally, unless there's a lockdown or something going on. So we can get into the prison, right? They know you're coming in, right? Because they clearly have to let you in. And oftentimes it doesn't take very long to have situations so that it's not what you would see if you just walked right through the door. So, I mean, that's not the most effective way of doing oversight. The other thing is, given the way that we work in the legislature, there's not a lot of time to actually be doing that, but especially in response to if somebody was able to get a message to you. So, again, I just don't think it's the most effective. It is somewhat effective, right? Because I do sometimes show up and I hear about it. So it has some effect, but it's not the most effective way. I think to have a body that is designated oversight and has the ability to get in swiftly and see what's going on, has the ability to respond to complaints and those kind of things is exactly what you need. The other thing is, I mean, let's just be honest, most legislators aren't trying to do oversight.
That's
Right?
right.
That's like,
Facts.
if you think they're trying to do oversight, you missed the boat. Look, most legislators are not interested in this in the way that I might be, or Robin might be, or somebody like that, right? Robert, we had on this issue of solitary, we had the cell sitting there, an opportunity to go into a cell that you have the opportunity to open the door at any time you want, right? So it's the experience, but it's not, right? Because it's not real. And aside from me, I think it's like you guys have the record, right? It's like 15 minutes, the longest anybody else did or something like that, right? And you know, as a matter of fact, in the previous time we did it, I did like 4 hours, right? And people were so concerned that I can open the door. They were so concerned that they're like, hey, you gotta come out of here, you gotta come out of here. A place where we would dump human beings, right? There's not that level of concern. The question is, how do you generate concern? Whether it be actual concern for the human beings or concern that not being interested in those human beings has impact on you as a legislator, which I think is probably the way that you would have to do it, right? You can't just cause people to be concerned about other people. But next year's election, I might be concerned about the fact that this has impact on my election. And so again, that's why I think it's so important to understand the need to show up. And if you're in New Haven, maybe you don't need to show up for us because we're all signed on as sponsors of the bill. But you know people who don't live in New Haven, right? You got to get those people to say to their legislator, you know, one of the issues that's important is this issue. And then the opportunity, the governor's going to be traveling around, right? It's election year. He's running for governor again. He's going to be traveling around. And the opportunity when he comes to your municipality, asking for votes, ask him about this. This never comes up. I've seen all of it, it never comes up, almost, to be honest, not just the issue of solitary, almost no issues of what's going on in our prisons come up whenever those conversations happen. Right, we need more money for this, we need more money for that. You know what, you don't need to say that, they know that. Telling them that is like letting them off the hook. Talk about an issue that is pertinent. And look, this is pertinent to you whether you have someone in prison or not. Those people come back. And this is part of the reason why you have what you have. People just never think about the fact that people come out of prisons, although most people will go away and come back out. So when you don't think about the fact that people come out of the prison, where do you do the stuff, right? The reentry and all of the other stuff at the end, right? You do it at the end and you're like, damn, they're coming out, we gotta do something, right? But that's why you have a system that's set up the way it is, and you have a system that's also set up so you can't recreate. You have a system that's set up so that you can't interact with people. You have a system where you think, you know, if I beat up on these guys, now it doesn't have impact. It does, right? And it has impact not just in that system, but back outside, particularly in places where people are in compressed communities where they live very close to each other, right? Because if you have a lot of these people returning and a lot of these issues, no matter what your individual experience coming back, we know that on the whole, the experience of coming back is filled with trauma.
That's right.
And that means you have a community that is ready to explode. It is important that we don't have that, right? You want to talk about why we have the stuff we're having going on
That's
outside,
right.
because
That's right.
my father was in the system and my grandfather was in the system, and even if I stay out of the system, I got a lot of problems.
That's right.
That aren't being addressed because we don't go to therapy either, right? So what do those communities look like? It's an issue of everybody, and even if you don't live in a particular community, there are no boundaries.
That's right.
Right, so because there are no boundaries, it affects every single one of us. So if you think talking about the money you need is the most important thing you're gonna say when the governor comes, it's not. If you think you wanna be safe in your community, you think, well, the solution is to talk about more cops, or something, you've got this flipped upside down.
That's right.
So, I mean, I don't have a magic bullet, but I do know that this issue is critical. It's the reason why I pick up this issue and talk about it all the time, despite the fact that as a legislator, that's not the way to get elected, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're gonna talk about public safety, if we're gonna talk about mental health, if we're gonna talk about any of these issues, and you're not talking about this issue, the issue of what goes on in our prisons, you made a mistake. And I'll say something else, and then, sorry, I gotta go. It doesn't matter what we say, it just like any of you, it matters what we do, because we've said a lot of good stuff, right? People flew out of the country, and they went to another country, and they said all of these things. Oh, it's amazing what they do in other countries in the prison system. They came back to a small unit, and they never tried to expand it. They put it on CBS and never did anything to expand it, right? Would everybody like to be in that special unit they have? I know you were. Would everybody like to be in a special unit? Yeah, they would. Right. And when I went in, guys were asking me, when I go in, how do I do that? The question should be, how do I do it? It's like this is the goal, right? The goal is to have that as what, but it's not the goal.
It's to the point where you got guys in there that don't even see the true unit as a good thing.
Right.
Because they don't have it. They're not getting the same benefits.
Right, so it doesn't mean to them what it should mean to them. And so now the true unit is nothing more than propaganda at that point, right? Like we got on CBS, look at what Connecticut's doing, except that's not what we're doing. But every legislator can check off, hey, we paid attention, right? So I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's not just that, it's the thing about the women with pregnancy that we talked about. I could go down the list of this stuff, about all of this good stuff that we should be doing in the prisons that we talked about, got credit for, and did not a damn thing about. Right. That's a problem, and the reason that we can do that is because when Barbara shows up for the last 30 years, and when I'm there doing my thing, it's Barbara and the crazy legislator and the 17 other people.
That's right. That's right.
And 10 years from now, it's gonna be Barbara and the crazy legislator and the 17 other people. With people saying this should be different. Well, it should
I
be
keep
different.
telling myself I'm not gonna be there, but you see, I'm still there every year.
Listen, let me say this. I've been saying the same thing, Barbara. We're both here. So, but my point is, it's great you're here tonight. What's
That's
even
right.
better is in February, March, April, and May, when we're in a legislative session, that you're visible, that you're heard, and that we can't walk away without having to respond to you.
That's right.
If we can walk away without having to respond to you, we'll be back here. We did this panel before, right?
Yes.
So we'll be back here doing the panel again.
And in saying that, there's so many different actions people can take. I mean, showing up is, of course, being seen and in their faces is really, really important, but there's other things we can do too. I'm working with some Yale students, Yale prison undergraduates. Phenomenal work they're doing. They just put together, one of the students put together this op-ed, and one thing that really stuck out to me that I never even thought about, that he made me think about, is he said, instead of us coming up with, these are the people that shouldn't go in solitary, mental illness, why are we thinking about who are the people who can take torture?
Right.
Why are we even thinking that?
That's right.
And I was like, wow, I never thought of that. Yeah, why are we saying, oh, this person shouldn't go in and that person, but it's all right to torture that person because they're younger, or it's all right to torture that person because they're not pregnant. Like, why is it okay to torture people, period? So I think that's one of the things right now I'm seeing we're going to have to take out of our bill, because no, torture is not going to be allowed for any human being.
That's right. Not one more.
And I just wanted to ask a question quickly from both of you, because I'm sure at the time you've been there, there was an ombudsman.
Yeah, the monthly.
Yeah, you have it too. Tell me about that experience. How effective was having an ombudsman? Because that's another thing we're working on in our bill.
It depends on, I guess, who was writing the complaint and how many individuals were complaining. Because a lot of times, like what Gary was saying about going in as a legislator or legislative official to speak with the department about what was taking place or taking form in the institution. If the lieutenants or the captains or deputy wardens got word of it, they would send their shift commanders or captains to round up whoever, initiated whatever letter to the ombudsman to find out what was going on before the ombudsman got there. If there's a health hazard going on there and someone writes OSHA, OSHA notifies the facility, we're coming. So you'll see the lieutenants and the shift commanders get all the chairmen out, the hall workers, and clean and spick and span. The commissioners come in. The commissioners come in on the 15th. The whole building is painted, swept, mopped, floors are waxed, and the day after the commissioner leaves, nobody cares.
Nobody comes out to clean that stuff.
Nobody comes out to clean no more. So we paint over dust, we paint over dirt, we sweep dirt into the corners until the commissioner comes and leaves, or whoever comes and leaves. So there's really no oversight. And like, I had a situation with Gary before when I started the program, the SOS program up in Osborne, and we had Gary as a guest speaker. Unfortunately, the legislative session had started, and only Brandon McGee can come. So, but we got the pressure from the administration is, why is Gary coming in here? Why are you talking to Gary about it? And then they got word that, they hate Gary. They don't want Gary in here, So we got a lot of backlash, and then it became, we need to know who you're inviting into this facility before you invite them in. Right. So that we can oversee you on the yay and nay. But our thing was pushing prison, not necessarily prison reform or reimagining prison, because I always tell brothers, you can never reimagine bondage.
Right.
So we're never even going to even talk about prison reform or reimagining prison. We just need everybody out, free, viable citizens back in their community. So how do we address these issues while they're in there, so that we can make sure that we get these men back out in full citizenship?
I just wanted to check the time, because I want to give the audience time to ask questions. And I want to just remind everybody, if they have to leave early, please take the time to fill out that survey. It informs me when I'm doing an event, what went well, what could have been better, that kind of thing. So please take the time to fill that out. Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're going to start the Q&A. If anybody out in the audience has a question, comment, whatever, please just raise your hand.
Oh, gosh.
No questions?
Yep, there's one up there.
Sorry. Cindy?
I'm sorry it was late. I just wanted to thank you all. I'm sorry I
Yes.
missed part of it, but
Cindy, could you come up here so they can see you? The people out there watching at Facebook, they can see you and hear your question.
I have a question and sort of some comments.
Just remember the time, we don't have 20 days.
How many questions are there? You're picking on me.
You can tell I'm friends with her.
You think you're picking on me already? So, recently I went to a town council or constituents meeting in Stanford with Representative Corey Paris, and I met a lot of the people in the audience. It was a good night, small group, but good. And I brought up how we're always, like, I'm one of the crazy 17 people with Barbara. Sometimes we're even smaller than the crazy 17. And I brought up that, with what I've seen after George Floyd was murdered, that, we had thousands, in New Haven alone, thousands walking with us on the marches. And so I said, we're trying to pass this legislature and we need help. And sometimes people, I don't think they mean to, but they say, well, we're not up there, but we're doing something behind the scenes. But unfortunately, we need to come together and show that what we did for George Floyd and try to get the movement going, we've got to do when Barbara's trying to get this bill passed. Because then they won't be able to get rid of us if they can get rid of 17 people or ignore us. But if there's 250 or 500, or when we were out there for the police accountability bill, the police get bussed in. And how do we fight that? When we're these small little groups. So I just wanted to encourage everybody that, man, do we need help. What's your question? Okay, that was my comment. Okay, so I missed the beginning, but I just got a report from a pastor that Cheshire Prison hasn't had hot water in over a month, and the people inside are scared to bring that to us on the outside. A pastor just told me, because they're afraid of retaliation, and I wanted to make sure that you knew that, and there's always work to be done, right? There's just so many.
Now, is that pastor gonna speak up and say that this is what's going on? Is he gonna join us in the fight, or?
Amen.
And he was inside and in solitary for quite a bit. So he said to me, he goes, you have more power than I do. I don't know what kind of power I got, but I just wanted to communicate that tonight. That we need to help.
Yeah, I want to let you speak, but I just wanted to speak to what she said, like about the pastor who knows what's going on. I find a lot of people's voices have been silenced in this movement, this prison movement. There's people that I have had a lot of respect for many, many years. They speak out on so many things. And I asked them during this bill, would you stand with me? And they would say, oh no, I have a job with the state, or I have a job with the feds, or this and that. So they don't say anything. So we need those people that know what's going on to have the courage to join us and help us fight this fight. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just left that facility on the 15th of last month. It has been without hot water and heat. The water pipes bust on the street, and what they've been doing prior to my exodus is they've been bringing in portable water heaters, household water heaters to hook up to the water system to supply hot water to 100 inmates at a time, which isn't sufficient. So although they're hot water heaters, the water is still cold.
Wow. And you said no heat.
No heat.
And it's wintertime.
And it's wintertime.
And it gets real cold.
And a lot of times they're shutting off the heat ducts to try to keep the airflow for cold. So they're depriving the inmates of heat so that they can try to keep the air fresh for them.
I know you talked one time on the show, Mr. Braham, about how many showers you have in certain units, and having to stand in lines that you may not even, by the time you get to the front of the line, you don't even have time for your shower. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's simple mathematics. Basically, it's 1 hour out, and you have 50 people to take a shower. 50 people can't take a shower in 6 showers in 1 hour. And then if you got the block that has 10 showers, 50 people still can't use 10 showers in an hour. I mean, most of the times you don't have 6 or 10 showers is not all functioning at one time. So 2 may be broken, 3 may be broken. Who knows? You know what I mean, sometimes 5 is the hour. It's just, you never know. You know what I mean? So it's first come, first serve. So many times, you know, we got, so think about it, right? Got that 1 hour. And, you know, Ray said that there's no exercise time. But some guys, if they exercise, they're gonna do it in that cell, right? And so that's another one of these stressors in the cell, right? Because if I'm in there, it's summertime, there's no AC really, right? And so you got somebody in there that's turning the temperature up, sweating the place up. You may not be around for that, right? And so that's tension in the cell, right? But then that person is waiting at the door for the door to pop to go run to the shower. He runs to the shower, now you gotta wait, right? Because it's a line at the shower, and you gotta wait. So your hour out, the time that you want to use the phone to call somebody, or you want to go play some cards, or whatever you want to do, you can't do it because you got to wait at the shower.
I think it should be clear that it's not necessarily an hour. It's never been an hour.
Yeah.
It's always been
50 minutes.
50 minutes and or less.
45 minutes.
And then they call a code in between that time, and your time is over.
Then you came out for 15 minutes, they call the code, and you don't come back out.
So I don't think we ever got an hour recreation, a full 60 minutes in my time on incarceration.
And I know you talked about when the commissioner from pressure did increase it to 1.5 hours. Now, in that 1.5 hours, does that mean all 50 people in that 1.5 hours have to get their shower and get on the phone or anything that they have to do? All those people have to
Let
do
me tell you how
that hour.
that time was increased by adding on, I think they added on 10 or 15 minutes after every child. So, no, it was 15 minutes, that's what it was. It was 15 minutes after lunch and 15 minutes after dinner. So you can't necessarily use the phone or take a shower during those times at Cheshire. You're just out of cell time, because that's the guys that, or the premise that they making it under, is out of cell time. So after child, they'll pop the doors and say, okay, you got 15 more minutes added to your time.
Wow.
But you can't get in the shower and you can't use the phone, because there's no way that you'll make it back into your cell by the time that time is up. And you risk getting a ticket for being out of place.
Yeah, because the phone calls 15 minutes.
Yeah, phone call 15 minutes.
We just increased the
Yeah.
free phone calls.
Yeah.
And so, and what is that? Is it still just 15 minutes?
Yeah, well, it's 15 minutes, it's still 6 calls a day, but it starts in, I believe, April. But right now, they're giving you, every Saturday, they're giving you 2 free calls because of COVID.
So everyone can get 6 calls a
6
day,
calls a day.
but you only
But
get
you
an hour
don't
out of
have,
that.
you don't have enough time in the day to make the 6
So,
calls.
so even though
You
you
never had
have the
enough time.
rule, even though it was passed, there's not enough time to do it.
There's not enough
anyway,
time
so-
in the day to do it anyway.
Yeah, so it just looks good on
Yeah,
paper.
it looks good on paper.
The system is just so contradictory, right? So you gotta think about that, like, you have, you know, a number of phones in the block, right? How many phones they got in your?
In the North Block,
10 phones,
they
12
actually put 12 in each unit now. So
Okay, so you got
For how many people?
in the South Block is 104 in a unit, and the North Block is 100 people each unit,
And 12 homes.
and 12 phones.
but you count that at criteria, so it's 50 or 52
Yeah.
or 49, right? And so.
But if you got working units, those guys that have work all day, so they'll never be able to use their 6 calls in the evening between those 2 tiers.
Not even that, because think about it, so you got 6 times 15, that's an hour and a half. Some guys use their 6 calls, so they'll sit on that phone for an hour and a half. So what about the other guys who need to use the phone? Fights
Yeah,
happen
that's what
over
I'm
the
saying.
phone,
Right.
Because there's not enough time out of the cell to use the phone. You know what I mean?
And that's one of the key reasons why, in the beginning with this whole tablet, I was always against the tablets because I thought that the tablets was a big pacifier for brothers that was incarcerated. I think they should have put their time and their energy towards something else that would be more beneficial. Like, and the state, I always tell people, the state don't care about these new free phone calls because the amount of money that's being spent on music and videos and movies now, that's I mean, it's astronomical. What they're spending, and the way they're baiting them is they're only releasing so many songs per day, so many movies per week. So you're always in demand to purchase. You know, I think families are having, like we talk about how families are suffering from paying phone bills. Now families are suffering from buying this music and paying for these movies for these gentlemen and these games. So I think that was one of the biggest pacifiers that the DOC found a way to slip in there and say, okay, you know, we'll give a free phone call, but you're making so much more money on the other end.
I was thinking that same thing when I heard about the tablets.
Yeah.
You know, they put it out there like they're giving people something to help them, when actually for them it's just a multi-million-dollar business for them.
No, it's more than that though. It's more than that, because Ray said it earlier, Ray said, you know, Connecticut hasn't seen a prison riot since what, 90?
Yeah, it's a pacifier.
Right, and so,
It's just like a parent that nowadays gives their child their phone or their tablet to sit there for 13, 14 hours throughout the day and just be quiet. You're not worried about the food you eat. You're not worried about, you know, your treatment, because you have something that keeps you complacent. And once your mind becomes complacent, you don't even see the need to get out. And it goes back to what I was talking about with reentry. If you're pushing someone like myself, I was sentenced to 50 years. I just spent 29 and a half years incarcerated, right? Without no reentry, other than my self-worth.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But if you were to push me back into the community, you know, and I had fall victim to everything that the DOC has given us over the years with regards to, you know, play and games and sport, you know, what would I be bringing back to my community? What benefit would I be going back into my community other than to make it suffer? And this is the mindset of so many young men that's coming in here. They don't see the need for change, because the DOC is saying all you need is this pacifier, sit here. We'll work with you 6 months to make sure you get out. But under the God, they know you're coming back in because you haven't worked on yourself. Nothing has changed.
Well, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming in today. I just want to make sure one more thing, sorry, one more thing. There was so much I wanted to cover, but I'm looking at the time and I'm saying, okay, I gotta end it. But I do have a statement that someone sent to me, and so I want to make sure that I read it, because I want to make sure that we're up to date on all the things that are going on in our prisons. So that's why I like to have people who just got out. Okay. And another thing that I didn't mention, but is very important, an article that was written that talks about white supremacist prison guards who work with impunity, not only in, probably all the prisons. And so that's another thing. Is that something that you are aware of? Do they do any white supremacist stuff outward?
absolutely.
Definitely. I mean, when I came in, the demographics was different. So you would have a lot of the old uniforms that the staff would wear. A lot of the white supremacist officers would wear red T-shirts under their uniform. So they were over with how they operated within the prison system. And then you think about, you know, the early 90s when I came in, I mean, we were in rural Summers, you know, there weren't black and Hispanic officers there to represent the black and Hispanic inmates that were there. So you had all of these white racist officers that were walking around and beating guys up and doing things and nonsense like that. And you still have them today. They're a little bit more covert, and you have some that are overt. You see them losing their jobs for, you know, making Muslim moonshine's and things of that nature. And posting them up. So, I mean, they're there. They're definitely there.
Yeah, and while we're on that, talk about the African American and Latino officers, because I mean we expect certain things from racist officers. What happens with the black and Latino officers?
I think that changes. Like it varies, because you're talking about it's pretty much like the military when I look at it. You have individuals that are being trained. You're going through boot camp, and you're being trained, and you're being indoctrinated into a fraternal order, which is called a correction officer. So you're pretty much you have to align yourself with the majority, right? Or you become the minority. Meaning, once you become the minority, you find yourself being taunted. You find you might go to work or leave work and you got a flat tire. You know what I'm saying? So there's things that take place to put people in line. You know, so you have those blacks and Latino officers that don't wanna put their foot on your neck. However, there's certain officers that are forcing them to act in a certain manner to get a desired result out of them. You know, you have, when Mike was talking about, let me see if I can recollect what he was talking about earlier, with the time that's being taken off by the office to, you know, further suppress those of us that are confined. These officers, you have officers that are in roll call, literally telling other officers, you have to use a PL day or you have to use an IL day because it's your time. So once it's your time to shorten the staff, there's not enough people to run the facility. The officers, the lieutenants and shift commanders begin to pull from posts. So you have inmates that aren't getting visits because the first officers they're gonna pull are the activity officers that work the visiting room. So now whoever was scheduled for, whether it was a virtual visit or a contact visit or a non-contact visit, they're not getting their visit for the day. There was weekends that I had visits scheduled repeatedly that were denied because they were short on staff, because they're playing this game of trying to get back at the governor for his executive order.
Wow. Okay, so this is a letter from Clyde Beagle. I didn't. I remember being called to the property room and thinking something not right. When I stepped into the hallway, correctional officers surrounded me and placed me in cuffs. I did not know what I had done, and no one informed me why I was being placed in cell. Sometime afterward, I was told I had received too many Class A tickets. For the first time, I was told that if you receive 2 Class A's and a Class B or 3 Class A's, I remember this gnawing feeling that I was lured into a trap, not only being deceived about being called to property, but also no one informing me that a certain number of tickets would subject me to solitary confinement. It is not only solitary confinement, but the entire process of luring individuals who might be grappling with mental health issues into the living hell of a 23-hour lockdown. The place that I was sent was called chronic discipline, meaning I was considered a problem. Rather than have a conversation with me when I was left to my own devices and punished for not being part of any form of corrections. When I first entered chronic in 1996, I was chained from waist to feet. The officers cut my clothes off me and took the chains off to put clothes back on me. Anyone who has been through this process of humiliation embodies that feeling for the rest of their lives. You have no control over the irrationality of it all. The entire process from beginning to end is absurd. For someone wrestling with mental health issues or grappling with the rigors of incarceration will only become more disturbed. I could talk about the daily humiliations. However, I want to express something a bit more nefarious about spaces that practice in solitary confinement. It is a place set up only to break people but make them feel small. In chronic, there's times when I felt so insignificant in relation to constant violence, the goon squad coming in and assaulting fellow officers, prisoners stabbing and assaulting fellow prisoners, the violence of being locked up 23 hours a day. There were times when I would see a correctional officer hog tie another prisoner. I don't know the technical term, but they got a brother on their stomach, pull his feet towards his back, and pull their hands toward their back. It always reminded me of a rodeo when a calf is roped and tasseled. I remember the feeling of helplessness, sitting behind a cell door unable to help. Often these attacks are emerged from simple requests, a prisoner requesting a phone call, or aggravated because someone said they sent him mail and it's been 2 weeks and he hasn't gotten it. Rather than talk to the prisoner, often they would fan the flames. Some might say something like, stop crying or you should not have come to jail. Often it's the silence from the officers that does it most. In your mind, you're asking them to do their job. One is locked 23 hours and has no access to anything that can help them but the staff. When they procrastinate with their duty or abuse their authority, a person under extreme conditions of solitary confinement is bound to snap. Imagine being locked in a cell 23 hours a day and being dependent on people antagonistic to your very existence of a prisoner. Their apathy seeps into and becomes anguish. How does one cope with perpetual anguish? Lucky I had read through George Jackson to model how he has dealt with being under perpetual emotional, spiritual, mental, and biological bombardment. The constant lack of care from the staff, the looks of suspicion from staff, the constant humiliations, and moreover, the 23 hours in a cell seeped into you. There's no escape from this concrete box that hedges you from being in from all angles. There were days that I had to allow myself to cry and allow myself to experience my vulnerability. In these moments, I felt more human than my captors. For my fellow prisoners that could not tap into this vulnerability, because in prison, being vulnerable means putting yourself at risk, they become hardened and struggle against the meaningless and absurdity of solitary confinement. Their fists, feces, urine, and feet becomes expressions of heart contaminated by a 23-hour lockdown. They attempt to struggle against the hardened heart of the staff with the only tool they have, which is their body, not recognizing they become more vulnerable because the staff's hardness is collective and systematized. Ours was collective, but dispersed, and so each act of seeking a sense of self through violence legitimized the collective systemization and hardened hearts of the correctional system. The point is, when I was able to practice my vulnerability with other prisoners, I felt stronger because we communicated with our anguish and found meaning with our process. I'm going to try to just skip over some of this. Solitary confinement. Okay.
This was an impossible task. Looking back, it seems easy. However, when I reflect a bit, my eyes fill with tears. I was dead and crying. For the whole 6 months, I did not get one visit. I received a $15 money order. I felt extremely lonely most days and nights because the relationships you form are no more than 150. However, they are so far away. There are moments since I've been home, and I wonder how I made it through. I ask myself, am I good? I wonder how much of that experience will affect my relationship with others. I endured that level of hell because chronic discipline is only a level of hell in an overall hell of prison. But I know many who have been destroyed by that experience. No one can tell me that it feels like, no one can tell me what it feels like to be a living dead man, because I experienced it and still live with it. Solitary confinement gnaws at everything that is supposed to make you human. And anyone who supports these kinds of spaces cannot be human. Unless the term humanity really means destroying what makes a person human. Solitary confinement made me realize that the spaces that seek to protect humanity are really operating to dominate, manage, and control our ability to be fully human with each other. In my moments of vulnerability, I learned a lot about what that space is doing to my brothers and sisters. It seeks to destroy the very thing that makes us human, which is our ability to transform ourselves in ways that can help our community and family. If we cannot look at solitary confinement and recognize how it cripples a person's ability to relate with another human being, then we will not recognize how pernicious it is. I carry the anguish of that space with me 25 years later. I cannot shake it. Luckily, I have a support network around me. Imagine a brother or sister who has endured that hell and now must face the world with no support. Prison is bad enough. Now imagine being placed in isolation with your ability to relate to another human being curtailed more. Eventually you begin to imagine new ways to cope with others and relate to the world of confinement. This becomes you, and in a sense, most of us become who the system designed us to be. A walking, talking dislocation, trying to locate yourself in a world that cannot comprehend you are anguish. Sincerely, Clyde Beaky.
And for those, and just for those who don't understand what the PROTECT Act is, first of all, you can go on our webpage, stopsolitaryct.org, and you can see all the information that we have on there about the work that we're doing. But I just wanted to let people know that the PROTECT Act is really, it stands for Promoting Responsible Oversight and Treatment and Ensuring Correctional Transparency. And what we're asking, Department of Corrections is not let everybody be free and give them TVs and all of this stuff. We're asking them to treat people as human beings. We say stop extreme isolation, end abusive restraints, protect social bonds. We are actually saying promote correctional wellness, because we understand there's people who go in the system for the right reasons and they get caught up in that system and it actually harms them also. So we're saying let's promote officer wellness. And then the last one is ensure oversight and accountability. Now, I don't really think we're asking anything that any human being shouldn't be asked for another person. So when you say you're supporting to protect that, I just want you to know what you're supporting. So thank you very much for everyone who showed up today. I hope everyone took the opportunity to fill out the little survey. It only takes a couple of minutes. And if there's any pizza and cookies out there, please take them. And no questions, no comments, right?
We can do this, sir.
Woo! Okay, we will do it. So I'm looking forward to us finishing up this work together. I'm looking forward to seeing you on February 5th when the session opens. And if you are planning on showing up to any of the events, make sure you take a shirt that's out there on the counter. So we want you to show up in your shirts so it's visible that you're supporting Stop Solitude. And I definitely want to honor the pastor, John Lewis. He wasn't here today, but he's been so gracious in giving us this space. And he shows up at all our events. That's one thing I can say about this pastor. He shows up at every event. He shows up at our protest, our press conference, everything. So, just think about him. We do have a pastor in the city of New Haven who cares and supports our issues. So thank you very much for everyone who came out tonight.